The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions, and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
Just like candy.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Ask for Candy, where a bunch of powerhouse women and a few brave dudes get together to talk about love, sex, relationships, and what it takes to be amazing on the daily. Who I am Candice Harper, lovecoach.com, coming to you live from the beautiful heart of Chelsea. I teach and inspire audacious intimacy to powerful, professional, grown women who want real relationships from seductive singlehoods. Most importantly, I help single city women over 35 who have given up on love stand boldly in their purpose, stop getting ghosted, and create unconditional love. And it's our Valentine show, everybody. Woo! Snap, snap. Snap, snap. Yay for Valentine's Day. I see Clarence has joined us, and Steven, who's here, has joined us on the Facebook Live. And as the people are trickling in, right? We're living in a vortex, everybody.
Watching you, watching me.
Watching me. I see Jenny Swart has joined us. So you might be listening to your TuneIn app on your smart device, listening to Armed Radio, or maybe you're in the garden on armedradioglobal.com if you're listening on audio. We're also on iHeartRadio, so if you have an Alexa, you can ask for Candy. And for the streamers in the group, you can listen to the replays on Spotify and on Spreaker. Or maybe you're live here with Lee and Kenny, who's also joined us. Hi, you guys. Hi, Clarence Schaefer. This should be interesting. Let me pull up a chair. I love that, Clarence. Pull up your chair. Pull up your wine, because we've got our chairs and wine.
We got our wine.
Right? If you want to call in, the call-in number is 1-800-508-5431 through the course of the show. But the best thing to do is be here with us live so you can make commentary and participate in this juicy conversation. Right, everybody?
Yeah.
So, like I said, I'm Candice Harper, Love Coach. My talent is conversation. My passion is personal growth. And my purpose is to teach and inspire radical self-acceptance in myself and in others so that we can all have our best possible love life. And that is why this is a conversation. We're not here to hand down a bunch of dating and relationship rules or rights and wrongs. We're not here to shame your love situation or your choices. Our only intention is to create audacious intimacy, seductive singlehoods, and healthy relationships. So tonight and every Monday night, we're going to do what we do, which is have conversations that engage, educate, and or enlighten all of us in the areas of love, sex, relationships, and high vibration. And because romantic relationships are not always hearts and roses, we have a very special Valentine's Day guest who's going to share some loving information for all of us here and all of you out there who want to have healthy relationships. So Stephen J. Dana is the founder and CEO of Protection from Abuse, a charitable organization that guides and protects victims and survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, and other violent crime. Mr. Dana is a victim witness protection specialist. That's a mouthful there. Right? A security consultant, bodyguard, and certified domestic violence and sexual assault advocate who has helped guide and protect thousands of at-risk women. So Stephen J. Dana is doing God's work. Mm-hmm. Welcome, Stephen. Yay! So tell us a little bit about you, Stephen, and how you came to create Protection from Abuse.
Well, December of 2015, I was inspired to take my tradecraft and apply it to this nonprofit space and make the type of services that were customarily only available to the very wealthy or the very privileged. Typically, a governor or a mayor or a high net worth person or a celebrity. So we took our tradecraft, we made it available to those that need it the most and would never be able to afford it.
Yeah. That's amazing. I love that. Like contributing to the world, making a difference, right? So the goal of the show is to understand, because Stephen has written this really great list called the Don't Date 'Em Girl list. Right. But the goal of the show is to understand the distinction between looking for the red flags and recognizing them. Because I always have this thing about, when we date and we navigate through the world, that we find what we look before. So it's not about like searching for it. It's about recognition. Right. It's about early detection for prevention, right?
Right.
So you wrote this really, really great list. I'm going to read a little bit of Stephen's article. Clarence says, thought he looked familiar. I, too, am a bodyguard and former security director for the Academy Awards. So
welcome, sir.
Right? Old friends, old homies. All right, so Stephen wrote this whole article. I'm going to read the beginning of it, and then we're just going to go through all the different flags that we're supposed to be sort of aware of if we see them, right? If they come up in relationships. So Stephen says, ladies, you are at the greatest risk of violence in your own home. According to a recent report by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, more than half of all female homicide victims in the last year were killed by intimate partners or relatives, which is insane that that's the world that we live in, right?
It is.
So how can you protect yourself? The best strategy for protecting yourself from potential abusive partners is to never get into a relationship with them in the first place. Absolutely. Too many women either do not know the signs of an abuser or ignore the red flags. So avoiding relationships with men who exhibit one or more of the following traits will improve your chances of not ending up in an abusive relationship. Remember, abusive relationships can be very difficult to end and escape from. Learn to avoid potentially abusive partners by recognizing the following. Now, before we get to the red flags, there was a metaphor one time we were talking that you gave me that described it perfectly. It was something about boiling a frog. You were talking about like,
yeah,
the
boil a frog analogy. So if you put a frog into a pot of boiling water, it's going to hop right out.
Yeah.
But if you heat that water very slowly over time, you will kill that frog with the boiling water. They'll never feel it. So when you're immersed in this type of situation, what we find is a lot of women are no longer calibrated to their sense of danger.
Yeah.
And that's your natural, God-given evolutionary biology that lets you know when you're in a dangerous situation. I think their senses have become dulled to it because they're living it and it becomes their new normal.
Yeah. And it's like slow and insidious, right? As opposed
it's
to
very slow and insidious.
Yeah.
So, not everybody is evil or good, right? I mean, some of the most evil people that have committed crimes on this planet have been described as quite charming and good-looking and articulate.
Ted Bundy, exactly.
Exactly. So we're rarely all one thing. So abusers don't start on the first date abusing somebody.
Yeah.
So often the signs are a lot more subtle, and they may have a lot of redeeming qualities. Yeah. And the face they put onto the outside world can be very different than what happens behind closed doors, and that's often the case.
I totally believe that. And Kathy, you were making a good point earlier too, that it's not just gender specific, right? Because anybody can be an abuser and anybody can secretly be abusing someone, whether physically or mentally. So let's go through these red flags. I love them, and I love how you named them after I just said about gender. So this is Mr. or Miss Sexism, but this one would probably be more of a gender-related one, I think.
And I think, you raise a good point. In fairness, men are victims of domestic violence or intimate partner violence, and I think it's very important that we acknowledge that. I default to Mr. because most of our clients are women. A lot of men don't come forward. So that's not to disrespect any man that might be going through that situation. I think we need to acknowledge that. But yeah, Mr. Sexism.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about Mr. Sexism.
So I think, the United Nations did a report. I mean, if you're a woman anywhere in the world, but particularly in the United States and some other countries, you're at a little better than 50% risk of being a victim of violent crime in your lifetime. That is a shocking number.
Yeah.
Right? And most of that violent crime is accounted for by intimate partner violence. So they did a report and they cited attitudes of sexism, where a man feels like he has authority and control over the woman, like he has a right to control the woman. They found a very high correlation between those type of attitudes and very poor outcomes, like what they call femicide, or the killing of your intimate partner.
Yeah, because if you feel like you're superior, then you feel like you can do whatever you want.
Right, and it's important. Like, these are nuances, right? Because I don't want to attack traditional relationships because they can work, right? Traditional meaning the man is the breadwinner. I mean, this is not about gender roles per se. It's not about somebody that chooses to stay home in a healthy relationship and raise the children, and the man provides. There are plenty of relationships like that are not abusive.
Yeah.
But when somebody has these views that I get to control you because you're my wife or you're my girlfriend, that's very different than two people willingly negotiating within the confines of a healthy relationship different roles and accepting those roles.
Yeah,
there's a big distinction there.
What do you ladies and gentlemen think about that?
Well, we live in a culture of patriarchy.
Come on in, Pam, so we can make sure to hear you.
Well, we live in a culture of patriarchy, where there is the assumption and the privilege of male privilege, and that family, wife, children are property. So I think one of the things that we really have to do is to challenge these norms and look for strategies to begin to have these discussions around privilege and patriarchy. Thank you, Stephen. So that we're able to, so that people don't feel so entrapped in these situations.
Yeah.
And I think one thing to do is always follow your intuition. Because if you have to ask the rabbi if it's kosher, don't eat it. So if your intuition is telling you, this guy just said something, like I went out with a guy last week and I kind of drank a lot of water that day. So I went to the bathroom 3 times and he said, so this is how it's going to be?
Ooh.
And I was like, so this is how it's going to be. 8 words just sunk your ass.
Don't mess with Kathy.
I want to really emphasize that when we talk about women's safety, and this, we're talking when you walk the streets or when you're in different situations, and particularly in dating situations, women time and time again ignore their gut.
Yeah.
And that is your God-given compass to what's, and a lot of times it's because they don't want to be rude, or maybe, some of the discussions we've had about where you're at in your life and what you're willing to accept. So maybe you're willing to, I'm going to look the other way because I think he's great otherwise on paper, and we have this attraction.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe if you were at a better place in your life, like our friend back here, brother, she says,
like I go to the bathroom as many times as I want to, and don't you say a word.
What were the words he used?
So this is how it's going to be.
And she's thinking correctly, and she's thinking, this is how it's going to be. You're the wrong guy.
Yeah.
Right?
And he said I wasn't ready for a man. I'm like, oh my God. Another thing that's a red flag.
Right.
Yeah.
What did he say?
You're just not ready for a man.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because you're not letting me chastise and control you,
right?
Exactly.
But it's also, we can't date in deficit. And listening and tuning in as women, tuning into our intuition is that gift of fear.
Yes.
Okay, it is, and we don't want to, again, be vulnerable, and we have to, kind of be out there and wear our cape. But when these things, as we're all part animals, and we have an instinction, an antelope knows when to run when there's a predator in the area, and we also have to be in tune and not discount or negate these feelings of vulnerability, and harness our fear, because making decisions based upon need and that deficit, but to counter that fear is what's going to keep us alive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I just want to say, because I think you're absolutely right, Pam, but I want to make sure that everybody keeps in mind that it's the fear that you feel in the present, that someone does or says something and you have a visceral reaction, not a made up fear that you walk into every relationship with or every date. We don't want you to walk around with a fear. It's when you hear something, feel something, don't ignore your body's visceral reactions to things that feel wrong.
That's right.
Because we have to remember, we're taking in, without even knowing it, micro expressions and body. We may not be able to describe it, but your internal hardware is reading all of that, how a person moves, their eyes, a crease in their lips, something, there's, something about their body language is off, or how they're moving, or how they said something on a date. Yeah. And time again, I think a lot of people ignore those signs, and you just need to trust your gut. You really do.
Barbara, you wanted to say something?
Yes, so in the conversation and just what Steve and Pam just said.
Don't forget to throw it out here. Project it.
So I work in the field of energy and consciousness, and so there's an energy that we're all aware of, but because we haven't been educated in the world of energy, at this moment, it's sort of not one of your tools. However, we have a knowing, like animals. Animals live because they know. Right. Yeah. We have a much stronger but we haven't been taught to do that. So the first question that I would put out to women or men, if you're in a situation, and you usually get something coming up, okay? All you have to do, it's as simple as anything, is simply ask, if I choose, and then whatever. So if I choose to go with John to the next party or whatever, what would my life be like in 5 years? Now, it's not the 5 years you're looking for. It's simply that we are consciousness. It's like molecules. When you say that, your consciousness and your awareness goes out into the universe, picks up the energy of what actually will happen if you go to that next party. And so if you get this heavy feeling and a contracted feeling, do not go. If it is light and fluffy, go, and you will be fine. It's just following your own knowing.
Yes, light and fluffy sounds awesome.
And I feel like the fear also is entrenched in fear of being alone. So you have to really be your own best friend. And, you know, I always say that no relationship is better than a bad relationship.
Yes,
and remember
absolutely.
that.
Amen.
Remember that.
My mom used to always say that you can do bad by yourself.
Yes, you
Right?
You live alone and
Right?
enjoy it.
It's
Wherever
true.
you go, you got to take yourself with you.
It's true.
Right.
It's very true. So wait, we got some people on the Facebook Live. I have Angela. Hi, Angela. The warning signs are always there. Family structure, dynamics, and history makes the difference.
Nice.
Clarence says, never ever question your internal warning system.
Amen.
Yeah, and he says, better question is, if you choose not to go, what will your life be like in the next 5 minutes? Well, and Lee Schultz, right? Happier. Lee Schultz says, amen.
All right.
So yeah, it's definitely, and it's what's crazy is that what always happens when we have a listicle is that we get through one or two, and my prolific group, we end up taking half the show on the first couple. But let's go to the next one.
Mr. Jealousy.
Yeah, talk about Mr. Jealousy a little bit.
So, you know, I think we had this conversation a little earlier, is that, you know, we all exist somewhere on a continuum. Nobody's all one thing or nothing. So, you know, I think some jealousy is normal. We all get jealous from time to time, but we're talking chronic jealousy, and a jealousy that is used to control. And, you know, what are you wearing? Why are you wearing makeup? Why are you doing your hair to go to the store? Or, you know, those controlling type behaviors that are just a chronic issue in your life. That is actually that type of jealousy, violent jealousy, is actually a screening question on risk assessments for lethality. So that type of jealousy can be correlated to, not a cause, but a correlation. There's a difference, right? None of these men in and of themselves or these behaviors cause bad outcomes, but they are highly correlated to those type of abusive relationships. And I think it's important to make that distinction. But, you know, so when we start getting to that far end of that continuum of jealousy, where it's a chronic issue and it has some control and maybe some violence behind it, where someone's always has input into what you're wearing, or whether you're wearing makeup or your hairstyle, where you're going and where you're coming to and who you're talking to, and your phone and your social media, it's never ending with some of our clients. You'd be surprised. That's a huge red flag.
Yeah. Also, too, and just from my own experience, I think with the jealousy thing, it's just such a good tool for shame and making you feel like you're wrong. Like you're wrong for wanting to look beautiful, or you're wrong for, you know, wanting to be an attractive, gregarious person, or being able to interact with other people. And so I feel like when someone is consistently vehemently jealous, it starts to make you feel like you're doing something wrong, which I think is also a big...
Well, they're trying to make you lesser than. That's not love. Love, you know, if I love someone, I want them to be their full self, and I want them to pursue, you know, their best self. And if you wear something and it makes you feel good, or, you know, doing your hair to go to the grocery store, whatever it may be, if it makes you feel good, then pursue it. But, you know, a healthy reaction is if you're doing things that make you feel good, that maybe make me feel extreme discomfort, well, then it's time maybe to re-examine the relationship. But that's not an excuse to try to control somebody or shame them for their choices.
Insecurity is the basic thing we're talking about, because they don't feel like they're up to snuff, and therefore they're trying to control you to make you bring back that thing that's missing in them. And Whoopi says it best. If somebody says you complete me, run.
Right. You should be
It's like I'm incomplete, right?
I'm completed.
Should
I'm
be
just a
two
cherry
holes
on the
coming
top.
together,
Right, exactly. Clarence says, never ever attempt to placate a jealous person. Yes. I mean, I think, Stephen, you made a good point. A certain level of jealousy can be cute, but if this is an always thing where I'm trying to reassure you, no, you're really the one, there's a problem going on.
But that's because I think that is because the person who is jealous inherently knows that he or she is not meeting the standard.
Their lower value.
Like their own
water
insecurity.
seeks its own level.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Inadequacy.
Right. So I also think that you can't give, it's that metaphor, with the camel and you stick the foot in the tent or something, and the next thing you know, the whole camel is in the tent. So you can't make, when you see these things or hear them, then you can't discount the impact that it has, because all it does is it starts to accumulate like a snowball. It starts really slow and you think it's it's kind of cute until you have your foot trapped or caught in that trap, and the only thing that you can do is the thing is to avoid, as Steve says, to avoid the trap.
Right.
Yeah.
And one real quick point. I've heard jealousy described by women many, many times as, well, he just loves me a lot. That's not love.
Yeah.
Right? That kind of jealousy is never love.
And
You're trying to control somebody.
Even little girls.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying. It usually comes from young
girls.
women, high school and
not even high school. My
school.
niece was 4 years old and was being bullied by this, and we asked her, and she says, "Well, what do you think is going on?" And she said, "Oh, and Pam, he just likes me." And she was 4 years old at the time.
Yeah.
So it starts. We need to have.
Well, that's what we used to say, right? If he dips your pigtails in the inkwell, he likes you. That used to be a thing. That if
Right.
he's abusive to you, if he's bullying you, teasing you, or whatever, he must have a crush on you.
He pulls your hair, right?
And my girlfriend said to me last night, do you think that this guy's right for me? Because he set me up with this guy, and then the guy calls me at 10 o'clock, and then my boyfriend says, well, how come he's calling you so late? I'm like, 10 o'clock is not so late. And besides which, you turned me on to him. And he said, you should be glad I'm jealous. I said, that's a red flag right there. You want to know
Glad
if you
you're
should
jealous.
date this guy?
All right, we got to get this next one, because this next one I feel like is pervasive and common. Mr. Substance Abuse.
Yeah, and this is another.
Oh, yeah. They like the drugs better than
All right,
that.
the drinkers, the weed heads, y'all know who you are out there.
Yeah.
Go ahead, what were you going to
Well,
say?
this is another correlation to lethality and really bad outcomes. I mean, we don't make good decisions when we're high or we're drunk. I mean, just as a matter of course, we restrict people to drive or to operate a motor vehicle, heavy equipment, be in certain venues. And I mean, if this is a chronic issue in your relationship and you have these other risk factors or behaviors, or there's abuse going on, that can be a very volatile and dangerous situation.
Yeah, and a lot of times too, especially I feel like with alcohol, it's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Like you can have someone who just is so mild mannered, and the abuse only comes out when they're drinking, or only comes out when they're using whatever they use. And this is not a PSA: don't use any alcohol or drugs if that's your thing recreationally. But you have to be aware when someone has a problem, like can't function without it, and then turns into someone else.
Right.
When they use it, right?
Yeah, and there's a trap there because people
and wants you to come along with them too.
Right. And there's a trap there because I think some people excuse, well, he only beats me, or he's only this way when he's drunk.
When he drinks too
But
much.
in my view, that's still something that's in you that the alcohol let come out. And to me, that's alarming.
The only thing that the alcohol.
Wait, hold on 1 second, Pam. I'm sorry, Kenya, please.
I said the alcohol gives you the courage to be that way.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
It gives you exactly. It's the portal.
Right.
Yeah.
It gives you permission. It lowers your inhibition, and the things that you would not normally say or do. Alcohols and other substances, allows you or gives you that permission, and it's a crutch.
Yeah.
And I think Steve, what you said about being with someone that has, these types of challenges, that it is not an excuse.
Yeah.
The alcohol is an aggravating factor. It is not a causal factor for abusive behaviors within the context of the relationship.
I like to say lots of people get drunk and never hit anybody,
Right.
or become abusive.
Right.
No, it's
But
true.
often they fall asleep somewhere on the floor, but
Right.
they're not beating up their wife. So I don't like to see that used as an excuse that he only does that when.
Yeah.
Right.
Because that also suggests that somehow that the drinking's going to just disappear at some point.
Well,
which,
that if you fix the drinking, you fix the
Then it'll
abuse,
fix
but it's
it.
still the same person.
Yeah.
But battling behavior, abusive behavior, is a choice.
Yeah.
It is not something that is inherent. You're not born that way. You make a choice to be abusive. And substance abuse and alcohol is, as I said, it's an aggravating factor.
Yeah.
But the bottom line, it's a choice.
Absolutely. Oh, I love this. So, Mr. Fear of Abandonment.
Yeah,
This one's
that's
interesting.
the guy that's he becomes very violent when you talk about ending the relationship. And in fact, and this is a very good topic, and this is something that troubles me greatly, because a lot of times when the subject of domestic violence comes up, the general public's reaction is, well, why don't you just leave? Well, leaving is a woman's most dangerous time. She's 67 times more likely to be killed when she's leaving a dangerous abuser than staying with one.
Wow.
Because of that fear of abandonment.
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
something that's tied to lethality. And it's a very high correlation. So we shouldn't just be telling, it's not so much leaving as much as it is an escape. Right, you have to escape, and you have to do it safely. So you need a plan, and it needs to be very structured. And and that's why my organization exists. We help them make that plan. We help them navigate that very dangerous space, because that's when. And Pam, she works in the prosecutor's office, and you see this all the time. We lose women when they're leaving their abuser.
Yeah.
All the time.
I mean, I think sometimes you're kind of in it when this sort of thing happens, but I think the red flag that might indicate that someone is Mr. Fear of Abandonment is when they put the pressure on you for their okayness. Like, if you ever left me, I would kill myself.
That's
or
it, right.
Yeah, like,
Threats of suicide are very common with that type of person.
right? And I think that's hard, like maybe early on to necessarily see those flags, but they do show up like, don't go to work today because I'm sick, and I'm going to get sicker if you don't stay and take care of me. It's that kind of like codependent, and it's obviously
Go to work.
Right? I can't live without.
I can't live without you.
Yes,
I'm gonna
you
fall
can
apart
live
if
without
you're not
me.
there.
You may
Yeah.
not want to live without somebody you love, but you
But you
can live
can.
without them. Absolutely.
And
So
there is
Yeah.
a fine line. There is such a fine line between someone who is homicidal and suicidal, someone who is desperate enough to take his or her own life, has no qualms
Yeah.
taking
taking you with them.
Yeah. right.
So that is, if I want you to stay home or I'm going to kill myself, that is definitely a red flag and an indication that you need to seek some support.
that also is threats of suicide is also a lethality screening question. And I hate to, a lot of women we speak to, they misinterpret that. Though he just wants attention. And sometimes it can be attention seeking, but sometimes they're serious. And
Sometimes they're homicidal.
we recently had a client that took
Yes.
his life in prison when his bail was revoked because of him violating the restraining order. So he was serious about killing himself.
Wow.
And he had made threats to kill. And
Yeah.
a lot of times those come hand in hand, threats to kill and threats to suicide. So with threats to kill and threats to suicide, my advice is to always take them seriously until proven otherwise. And to seek the help of a professional to help you evaluate just how serious those claims of I'm going to kill you or I'm going to kill myself are.
There's no otherwise. If
Yeah.
someone
It's
says,
all
and you
anger,
have
too.
to believe, when someone says they're going to kill themselves or kill you, you have to believe them. And it's not,
point.
it is not the victim or the person who is navigating and existing in this situation to make that assessment. Believe them.
Yeah.
Believe them.
Because even if you're wrong and you didn't believe them, you still end up okay. You know, like just believe it.
Chance of survival.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Mr. Blamer.
Well, that's the man who blames negative feelings and bad luck on someone else. So, so this was, I pulled this from Psychology Today. So they can really be seductive in the beginning because they'll compare you to others while blaming others. Like, you're so smart, but my ex was this. And it's part of that manipulation and that false seduction, because, you know, healthy seduction is based on healthy behaviors. It doesn't necessarily have to do with comparing you to somebody else. You stand alone, right, on your own merits.
Absolutely.
So that's part of that manipulation.
Yeah. My ex used to say, you're acting like my crazy girlfriend. And then at some point it dawned on me, like, if we're both crazy, you're the constant here.
Right.
So
right. You're the common denominator.
You're the common denominator. Right, exactly. Exactly. Does anybody have anything to say about a Mr. Blamer?
I just wanted to add, to kind of go back to fear of abandonment. Actually, fear is at the root of all of these behaviors, right? Somebody would not behave in this ugly way unless they were coming from a place of fear, insecurity, self-loathing, and
shame.
Exactly. Lots of those. And, you know, a lot of times abusers come from abusive homes. And so I wanted to point that out because I think fear is at the root of all of these. Yeah. Right?
Good point.
Absolutely. And we were talking the other day too about how, you know, there is you know, you can have an empathy for an abuser. You can have an understanding that they come from a background, like anybody who watched Surviving R. Kelly, like, you know that he had a sexual abusive background and everything like that. But where it gets dangerous is where you allow the behavior because you're making an excuse for what they've been through. Mm-hmm. So it's like, you know, we're not responsible for what they've been through, and we can't fix it. Like, if they're not in a space of healing themselves, you know, especially in a romantic relationship, a lot of times we get into this thing, well, he had such a hard child. I did that myself because I felt a little guilt because I didn't have such a hard childhood, and he'd come from so much, you know, lack and, you know, uncomfortable situations and, you know, things that I didn't see growing up. And so I would always say he came from something that was difficult, so he can't help it. But that doesn't mean that I should be compromising my safety and compromising my own love and happiness and all of that for the sake of what he's not healing. And it's very important, you know, no matter the gender, with a partner, that you don't make an excuse and stay with them and, you know, be codependent, but still you can empathize while you're walking away.
My friend Connie was at a show and she was given a pamphlet about the 12 signs of abuse, and she looked at it and she goes, "Oh my God, there's 8 of them that apply to me." And it just was this aha moment because she was setting the alarm system on her house and she suddenly realized the only person she was really afraid of was the person inside the house who lived with her. Yeah. And it was that sleeping with the enemy kind of feeling. And she said she made the decision right then and there to get out. And now she's completely happy with Vaughn. They moved to Colorado, and you can turn it around. Yeah, and she had a plan, like you were saying, and she got out, and she told him when she was driving away from him that she left him, and he said, "What did you leave me? What did you leave me? Wow. What did you leave in the house for me?" Yeah. That's all he cared about.
That's all he cared about.
So she got her answer right there.
This is also a good argument for when people need to save their children from situations like this, because this is how these monsters are made, right? When children who are raised by abusers and they see this and get abused themselves. Yeah. So if you're in a question of, do I leave and do I take my children away from their mother or their father who's abusive? There should be no question, because they're just going to teach them to be the monster.
Yeah, but there is. So it's not, the question, as Steve said, is like, why don't you, or why haven't you left? You have to ask, what's keeping you? What keeps you in this particular situation? And it's like Clint said, huge is finances. You may not have the resources to leave. So, you have to, and there's support out there that can help you navigate your situation until you're in a place to leave. And then you may not choose to. And that's a choice. One of the most debilitating things about being a crime victim, but in particular an intimate partner violence victim, is the incredible loss of power and connection. Okay, so just saying, well, you should go, and your children, sometimes you're not in the position to do that in the time frame that we think
that
you should be doing it.
Yeah.
But we as supporters and as allies and partners have to believe victims and allow them the autonomy and that they know what's best for themselves and for their families in order to stay alive.
That is a really great point, because it goes into that whole paradigm. Why don't you just leave? There has to, it's escape, number one, and then there has to be resources. But Candy raises another great point, because we polled, our organization polled, I think it was over 1,000 women that didn't or left and went back. And one of the top reasons was because of the children. They wanted them to have both parents. So there is a laundry list of very bad effects that children being raised in an abusive environment. I mean, it goes down to their DNA. It affects all sorts of metrics in terms of outcomes of success and becoming healthy adults. And they are far more likely than their peers to become an abuser or become, to be involved in an abusive relationship. Because you've normalized it for them. They grew up in it. It looks normal.
It's what you know. You get conditioned to it.
Right. So I think to the extent that you can leave, and if you're hanging on balance of whether I want my children to have his mother and his father, I think you need to be shifting over to, well, we can't have this child. And you can't have a child in an abusive situation, because as you know, and you've seen, and I've seen working with the system, if CPS, if Child Protective Services, finds out your child is in that type of household, they will come take your children. That's how serious they take it.
You run the risk. That is not an automatic.
Not an automatic, correct. But it's a risk.
But that's what the abuser says.
Yes.
Okay, so, being informed and believing, starting from the point that I believe you, and I want to help you, and not being judgmental for people to even be in a position to reach out. People stay in these situations sometimes because they feel that they have no other options and they will not be believed, or they don't want to be judged.
Great points. Great points.
Yeah. So Clarence says he's got to run. Duty calls. Hope to join you guys again. Lee says Jamie is so very right about fear. I have watched otherwise strong people stay involved. Jonathan just joined us. Angela says, my point exactly, which I'm not sure whose point she was agreeing with. But Lee says there also needs to be focus on treating the abuser to help end the entire cycle of abuse. Yes, treating the abuser is the job of not the person who's in the relationship with them. And Barbara, you have something back there.
Yes, so we're living in a new paradigm now. And it's just like saying we don't drive, horses. We drive cars, or we go on planes. Okay. So what you're talking about, science has now come up with some knowledge about energy, and for instance, things like someone who has duck feet. Okay. Well, in the past, they would say, well, that's inherited from the DNA of your father who has duck feet. Well, now that's changing because we're changing. And so in the world now, energy, if you go to the top quantum physicists and stuff like that, everything is energy. So everything that you're saying is correct, but there's another level. So the children growing up, or the man who's abusing his wife, or whoever, they have what we call biomimetically mimicked the energy from some past. Now, there are many ways to work with people. I like to do the fastest way, and that's energy. So any woman who is in this place right now in your life, okay, if what I'm saying doesn't sound totally crazy, find someone who works with energy. When you work with energy, it's like saying you have a point of view, but it's energetic. If you just move that, and it could be very quick, then you're going to be drawn to is going to change because you've taken away the energy that was actually pulling you as a magnet, because that's the energy you were holding. So just, if anyone is looking for a way to change and you want it to be quick and pretty easy, look for someone who works with energy, and it will be so much easier.
Yeah. Thank you, Barbara. So now we have Mr. Resentment.
Yeah, Mr. Resentment, another one we pulled from Psychology Today. So he feels like he's not getting the help, consideration, praise, reward, or affection they believe in. This is another one that exists on that continuum, right, to where it could be benign to very dangerous, because at the far end of the continuum, Mr. Resentment is a grievance collector. And when we look at managing violent, potentially violent people on a path to violence in the community, that type of person that is collecting grievances are the type of people that go to work and shoot up the workplace or shoot up schools. So that's to be taken very seriously. And that's a mindset that it's an external locus of control. So everyone else around you is to blame for outcomes and your conditions. And it goes a little bit beyond that, because you're keeping score, so to speak, right? Makes sense? Yeah.
Absolutely. And everything's out of your control.
Right.
Meanwhile, you're trying to control everything when you're abusive.
And he resents you, and that's not part of a healthy relationship when your mate is resenting you for things that they think you should be doing, or they're not getting enough of if they're unfair. I think some resentment, everyone experiences that emotion.
Yeah.
And when it's a chronic, it's part of their personality, where you just can't do enough for that person, and they're collecting grievances from work or friends, or
and they never let you forget anything.
Right.
They never. The resentful people never let you forget a thing.
Right. And as you're getting to know someone, if you let people talk, they'll talk about work, they'll talk about relationships, and if you're paying attention, these things will come out in conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I see Darren joined us, Brad, Brian, hi, welcome you guys. Angela says family history matters. I agree with that, Angela. That's true. Wait, there also is. Oh, we already got Lee. And I see Elena joined. Hi, Elena. Hi, everybody. So now we're at Mr. Entitlement.
Right. Mr. Entitlement believes he's entitled to special treatment and consideration. And they tend to ignore societal norms or established rules and attempt to do pretty much anything they choose. After the honeymoon phase with that type of person, he'll regard his feelings and desires more important than your own.
It's not that they're outside the norm, working outside the norm. They're working within the norm of culture, and it speaks to privilege. So if you are someone that has privilege, you feel that you have that sense of entitlement,
right,
and that there is a hierarchy, and that my needs negate and diminish who you are and your autonomy. So we're not. The challenge and the problem is not the outlier. It's challenging and looking at where privilege has set itself up in terms of these types of relationships.
Right. And I think one of the insidious issues is you're getting to know someone. They're generally on their best behavior. They're not going to exhibit this behavior directly towards you.
Yeah.
But we need to be, I think dating is one big job interview, right? We're kind of feeling each other out, and one thing we should be concerned with is that how that person treats others.
Yeah.
Right. So somebody that feels entitled or
like talks down to the waiters.
That's a cliche, but it's a big red flag.
Is that part of your daily lexicon?
Absolutely.
Right.
Please and thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
So somebody that would treat a waiter or anybody like that will eventually come around to treating you that way if the situation suits them.
Yeah. Like no kindness or compassion.
Right.
Does anybody have anything about a Mr. Entitlement? No? Okay.
No one dated Mr. Entitlement.
No one. Well, I did. I feel like I dated the whole list in one person. One person.
But that's common. We speak to when we deal with survivors of abuse, and they read this list, and they're like, "Oh, he was every one of those.
Yeah.
Or he was half of those." Or so it's important.
Like it depended. If he was high, then he was Mr. Sarcasm, whatever. Yeah. Okay, what about Mr. Superiority? We did Mr. Entitlement. Well, now what's the difference between Mr. Entitlement and Mr. Superiority?
He thinks he's better than everybody. And the insidious, the real harmful type is somebody that needs to put someone else down to make themselves feel better.
Yeah, yeah.
And eventually that will be focused on a mate. So, they need to bring others down to lift themselves up.
Yeah.
Whereas most of the people in this room lift themselves up by helping others, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Mr. Petty.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about Tom Petty.
Not Tom Petty.
Who I love. I know, right? I love.
He's the guy that'll make a big deal about anything, make you and others feel so that they cannot do anything right. And that is just a common theme in abusive relationships. And, I think it's important to distinguish that when we say abusive relationships, we're not just talking physical violence, right? As we talked before we went live, there's financial abuse, there's emotional abuse, there's spiritual abuse. And I've spoken, and I'm sure Pam has as well, to many, many women that say, I wish he would just hit me rather than endure the emotional abuse, because the bruise is going to heal.
Yeah.
But the emotional abuse lasts sometimes a lifetime. And I think it does last a lifetime.
Didn't they just do something in Canada about its emotional abuse? They deemed it that mental abuse is just as dangerous as physical abuse.
It is,
yeah.
And in this country, we're slow. We haven't caught up with that. I sat in court the other day with one of our clients on a permanent restraining order hearing, and the judge was very pointed about the fact that emotional abuse and verbal abuse is not a predicate act of domestic violence.
It's okay. There's domestic violence, and then there's the legality.
The legality, that's right. So the legality of domestic violence.
You can't get arrested, and this is where we kind of get confused. Just emotional abuse, coercion is not a legal. It's not recognized as a crime
in this country.
In this country. Well,
I think in the UK, I think they just passed some laws in other countries
I'm not sure.
They're catching up to that.
But the bottom line is, just because there is no grounds legally, so you can't go to the police and get a complaint, swear out a complaint for emotional abuse, does not mean that you are no less a victim.
That's right.
I want to be really clear with that. You are no less a victim.
Right.
And when we talk about violence, the physical assaults, the violence is the enforcer.
Yep.
So you have the threats, you have the coercion, you have the emotional abuse, you have the withholding,
the control,
the control and the lack. But it is the violence on the wheel that enforces this type of behavior.
Right. And it's a very important distinction, and thanks for putting a finer point on that, because I think a lot of women in these relationships don't think they're being abused because they're not being hit.
Right.
Yeah.
And
right.
that's
it's like
not the case.
It's like a sexual assault. Okay, so sexual assault is a legal term. If you can be charged criminally for a sexual assault, but what happens in the process of being assaulted, it is a violation. So I'm very clear when working with victims to make that distinction that you have, because if you can't go to court, so say for instance you go to court and the jury comes back with an acquittal, with a not guilty, or is that person any less a victim? It is a violation, and so there's a difference between an assault and a violation.
Yeah.
And I was in a verbally abusive relationship, and I think one of the trickiest things for me was that I was told that I was, crazy for my point of view or my perspective.
Yes,
and that's how people get really confused. That's gaslighting.
Yeah.
Because you think, oh, well, I guess I am wrong. And, oh, it's me again. Like I did that thing and, oh, I'm stupid or whatever. And so your self-esteem goes down. Your spirit starts to die. That was my experience.
That there's a dissidence. There's a dissidence in the behavior between what you know and what you're experiencing.
Yeah. It's confusing.
And it's crazy making.
It's
crazy making.
Barbara, what are you going to say?
So when I work with women, and mostly women, who are in that situation, just as you were just saying, and I said it before, but watch the movie, the original 1946 movie,
Gaslight.
Because and I have women watch it at least 5 times, just to really see that.
That's what it is.
It's so subtle.
And
what it is, and so many of those women, and then of course I use an energy process with it, but it is amazing how it starts to shift everything, because it brings an awareness like, oh my God, I didn't even realize what's going on. And just as Jamie is saying, you feel like you're going crazy.
Like it's got to be me. What's wrong with me that I can't take a joke? What's wrong with me that I thought that this was true and it wasn't?
And then you can't listen to your intuition at that point. So that's where it's like you have to build that muscle of listening to your intuition and really trust that, because when you're in that situation, your intuition is like maybe a whisper if you're lucky, and it's really hard to hear yourself. And I forgot what else I was going to say.
But no, thank you for that, Jamie. I mean, I think you're absolutely right.
Can I chime in for a second?
Yeah, Clint.
So we're talking a lot about escaping the abuse. But what about empowerment? Because the abuser is going to continue to abuse. And if they can't abuse you, then they often find someone else to abuse. And sadly, the person who's being abused, the original victim, see it play out again, and they need to be empowered to speak out and advocate for other people, and that's something that's rarely spoken about, the advocacy and the helping in the prevention of abuse further to other individuals.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, Tim. I love that you said that, because that's why I do what I do. I mean, as a coach, I teach radical self-acceptance, because I actually do believe, because from my own experience and my own research studies and things like that, that the way that we get in these situations is based on what our relationship is with ourself. And you mentioned it earlier, Stephen, if with a low self-worth, we will accept a lot of things from other people that with a higher self-worth, we will not accept. And a self-worth is something that when we get aware that it's something that we can transform, it can be whatever we want it to be. Like you can have a deserve level that's through the roof, and you could also have one that's, down in the basement. But it's something that we can make a choice about. As soon as we're aware, we can make a choice. A lot of times we're conditioned into thinking that you are what we've told you are, or you're as worthy as, whether that's your parents or whoever raised you, that you're as worthy as what we say you are, when really we get to decide what our worth is. And I think we end up in abusive relationships when we either forget that or don't know it. Right? So I think the empowerment comes from actually learning, like, I can be worthy because I choose to be worthy.
But it also comes, and we talked about a little about this last week with sound and with talking. One of the things, as I said, one of the most debilitating things about being a DV victim is that sense of disempowerment and disconnection. So, you are trying to navigate. You're being isolated by the abuser. Your power is being taken away. As supporters, when we talk about empowerment, this is not a women's issue. This is a men's issue and a woman's issue and a children's issue. This is a society issue, and we have to create avenues so that people feel that they can come and talk about, and even that they have permission to go and seek the support that they need. When we are talking about guilt and we're talking about shame, it isolates us, it puts us in a box. So we talk about empowerment. So yes, it is about recognizing your worth, but we have to be in a space to allow people to talk about these issues, and to seek and to have things in place, not wait until you're in crisis and then trying to figure out what's going on, because that never works. But to be in position and to be an ally. So when people, one of the bravest things that you can do is tell your story.
Yes, that's very true.
So when someone comes in and they say, are we willing to say, I think maybe something, but I don't want to get into business, right? Or and we see it all the time. I'm having some problem. I'm going to pray for you. Pray your strength, and then, but you're not putting the resources behind the actions behind your words, so that people are in a position to help get free from this situation.
My abuser made me feel like it was my fault. So, he turned it back on me. Like, if you were just different, I wouldn't be this way.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that was really dangerous because I'm a pleaser. So I would say, what am I not doing right? And he would sit me down and give me this big lecture about there's a man out there who's right for you, and maybe it's not me. And he would lecture me, and I would feel so trapped. And I and it was his 40th birthday. All my friends were drinking. His father was a drunk, and I got a little bit tipsy, and I had made this bracelet out of all these pearls. And I got up, and he said, "You're drunk, and you're embarrassing me." I said, "Oh, really, Lance?" Bam! And I punched him, and the bracelet just went, and all the pearls went, and I went, "That's it. I'm gone."
Well, yeah, no one messes with my
Exactly.
people.
And I know that bracelet breaking.
Wait, I gotta say hi to Kevin and Julie and Angela who have since joined. Hi, everybody. And also, as always, the time goes by so fast. We're already at 56, and I just want to
Let's skip to this guy.
You want to skip to what?
Let's close on him. We'll skip the last two because this is an important one.
Mr. Rush.
Mr. Rush. Right?
Okay.
This is the guy.
Also, wait, before you say that, I just want to make sure that we're leaving, and for you guys too, leaving enough time because I want to give people the National Domestic Violence Hotline information and stuff like that. So we're going to participate. We're going to make sure to leave a little time. Okay, go ahead.
So, Mr. Rush, I mean, this is very common in abusive relationships. They can't, they're knocking down boundaries. They want to sweep you off your feet. They want to pressure you to move in together, have a child, let's get married. They're trying to accelerate the relationship beyond that, which is your comfort level. With respect to, sometimes people have that comfort level as well, and they get swept up in it because they may be similarly dysfunctional. But as I like to say to somebody, if he loves you today, he's going to love you 6 months from now or a year from now. What's the rush?
Yeah.
You don't have to be married right now. Because if it's one thing to get out of a marriage, but when you start having children together, that's almost like a life sentence. It is very difficult to leave a relationship when you have children together.
Yeah.
Because the parenting rights are going to bind you together, even if that person is very dangerous.
Yeah.
They don't lose parenting rights.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to lose parenting rights. So you're going to be bound to this person that's potentially dangerous to you, and you're going to have to navigate that space for a long time. So we need to be really careful about that choice of who we have children with and rushing. Yeah. I mean, so
who we tie our finances to, who we have children with, who we buy property with, like all of that stuff is like anchors, right?
And I think that, I like to say that, when we're on honeymoon and everyone's on their best behavior, a lot of these things are very subtle. And if you're not really in tune to them, you might not see them. I like to say, I don't know you until I've seen you endure a bad time. Until we've had a fight, until I've seen you in some type of crisis. Doesn't have to be with me necessarily. It can be at work. It can be with your family. How you handle tough moments, I think, is a window into your soul.
Yeah.
And we like to excuse those. We he was going through this.
Yeah.
Or, this happened, so I'm going to excuse this. And I think sometimes there is room to explain some things away, but like getting drunk and being abusive, it's still within your character. It's still there. You don't ignore it.
Yeah.
Right? So if you can tune into these things and just slow the relationship down, because in the beginning it's all hormones.
Yeah.
And it's like we're drunk. We're not thinking with a clear head.
Yeah.
Because the attraction is playing its role, and that takes a while to wear off.
Yeah.
And depending on where we are in our life, we may desperately want a relationship, and we're willing to overlook certain things. Our self-esteem might not be, or a sense of worth.
Ooh, that's the Armed Radio, people. We got one more minute with Armed Radio.
Our self-esteem might not be where it needs to be, and we're willing to excuse some certain behavior. So just, slow down, take your time, get to know the person.
Yeah. Now, I want to give the Armed Radio people the domestic violence hotline. National Domestic Hotline information is 1-800-799-SAFE. 1-800-799-7233. You can also go on their website, but if you're in an abusive situation and they might have access to your computer, they have an option for you if you can't talk. I don't know exactly how it works, but you can go to the National Domestic Violence Hotline website. Is there anything else you want to tell the Armed Radio people before they go? Because we have the Facebook Live people for a couple more minutes if anybody wants to do closings.
If anybody's in a dangerous situation and they want to reach out, they're having difficulty, you can find me on Facebook under Stephen Dana. You're free to message me, and you can even text me on our cell phone. It's 856-803-9494. And if you need help and guidance, reach out and we'll be there for you.
All right, Armed Radio people, happy Valentine's Day. Never forget you're a love machine. If you ever start to feel like you're not getting enough, just make more and ask for candy. Take care of yourselves. I love you. Bye, Armed Radio.
Bye.